Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Hey, what's going on, everybody? So there's been some movement in the settlement process for the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein, and it looks like 17 or so of them have entered into negotiations to receive some compensation. Now, everybody knows where I stand on that. I believe that all of these survivors that were abused by Jeffrey Epstein deserve the compensation. Not even a question, no debate, no discussion, none of it. Let's get these girls paid. If they're entering into this settlement and that's the route they choose to go, then let's make sure that these funds are dispersed in a very timely manner. Let's make sure that it's done fairly. And let's make sure that these girls who choose to enter into this program aren't being taken advantage of for a second, third, fourth, fifth, or 10th time. And I don't think that's too much to ask from the process, right? A fair shake for these survivors, a fair shake for the people who were abused by Jeffrey Epstein, and to make sure that the estate isn't trying to cut any corners or cut any money off of the top when it comes to paying these girls out. So, let's jump into the article by The Sun and see just what exactly this article has to say. Headline: Survivor Victory. Jeffrey Epstein estate enters into settlement talks with 17 women who filed sexual abuse suits. This article was authored by Chris Spargo. The Jeffrey Epstein estate and 17 of the pedophile survivors have entered settlement talks. These women have agreed to participate in a victim compensation fund that will assess each claim before issuing a payout within 90 days. Well, it sounds good on its face, right? It sounds good that, there's some movement here, that these girls are going to be able to get a little bit of compensation, some validation, and hopefully start rebuilding their lives, right? That's what it looks like on its face. But again, we have to always be skeptical when it comes to this case. We have to certainly be skeptical when we're dealing with Indike and Khan for sure. So while this looks good on its face, and the early signs are that it could be favorable to these survivors who choose to partake in it, again, we have to be careful for underhanded activity, and I hope the lawyer who is representing these girls who have come forward and want to be part of this is prepared to really hammer it out and not just accept the settlement knowing that they're going to get a windfall payment. Because honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of lawyers in general. They're right up there with politicians for me. They're usually one and the same, and they're usually all crooks, right? So I'm always very skeptical about these high-profile lawyers. I've been on record about Gloria Allred, how I feel about her. Her daughter, Lisa Bloom, I'm on record about her. I just don't dig it. I don't dig the way these lawyers conduct themselves. I don't dig the way they abuse people. And I certainly don't dig the way they get a big, gigantic windfall a lot of times while pressuring their clients into taking settlements that otherwise these clients might not have taken. So again, it's very important when it comes to cases like this that if you're involved in this and you're victimized by somebody like Jeffrey Epstein, it's so important to have proper legal representation, the sort of representation that's willing to go the extra mile to make sure you get every last bit that you deserve in compensation. So I'm hoping that the lawyers, in this case, Jordan Merson, is going to do that. And one of the other lawyers here is Lisa Bloom, and honestly, we know that she likes to chase paydays, right? I want to give her the benefit of the doubt here, but it's hard to give people the benefit of the doubt when they have proven time and time again to be snakes. The Sun has obtained legal filings which state that 12 women represented by Jordan K. Merson of Merson Law Firm and 5 women working with Lisa Bloom of the Bloom Firm agreed to the parameters of the fund. That's interesting. I'd like to see what those parameters are, like the full layout of those parameters. I don't know if that's something that's public knowledge or, something that's going to be out there anytime soon, but I'm very interested to see what those parameters are, the full context of the agreement. I would love to check that out. Any of the women who agree to participate in the fund will have to sign a 4-page contract that states they can never again file legal action against the Epstein estate and co-executors Darren Indyke and Richard Kahn. Well, that's not very promising, right? I don't know if I was a lawyer here, if I'd be comfortable with that. I guess, you know what? Let me rephrase that. It depends on the circumstance, right? I guess if my client was only abused by, say, Jeffrey Epstein, then I can understand why they would sign this sort of document and take the compensation and move on with their life as best as possible. I totally can understand that. But if I had a client who was abused by multiple people within this organization, and they had said that these people that were working with Jeffrey Epstein were also involved with their abuse, then there's no way that I would ever be okay with my client signing an agreement like this. So I guess it really comes down to each circumstance is different. Each one of these survivors has their own story, and it's up to them to write the end of the story, meaning whichever way they want to go with this compensation, or if they want to see it all the way through. Whatever they choose, it's solely up to them. They're the ones who had to live through this for all these years. They're the ones with this great burden. And I can totally understand if they want to move on with their lives, get the compensation, and try and rebuild. It's 100%. Especially if it was just Jeffrey Epstein who was the one performing the abuse. I could totally see how a lawyer could say to his client then, all right, let's sign this agreement, let's get you paid out, and let's move on with your life. But if any of these lawyers are trying to coerce these girls into taking an agreement and signing one of these sort of NDAs where it takes blame away from other people involved, when the girl says that there was other people involved, if any lawyer is the type is going to advise them to take the settlement anyway, well, that would be completely unacceptable. And I'm not saying that's what's going on here. I don't really know Jordan Merson. Obviously, I don't know too much of about his history or about his work. But with Lisa Bloom involved, I'm very skeptical. I'm very skeptical that Lisa Bloom would be the type to steer her clients towards just a windfall of cash. You know, break out the cash helicopter and come and drop some out at my house. That's the kind of person Lisa Bloom is. And I'd really hate to see these survivors get victimized once again by the process. I'd really hate to see that. So I just hope that these lawyers are really keeping the best interest of their clients at heart and not the best interest of their own personal bank accounts. They will also be unable to file suit against any entities or individuals who are or have ever been engaged by, whether as independent contractors or otherwise, employed by, worked in any capacity for, or provided any services to Mr. Epstein, the Epstein entities, or the Epstein estate. And you see, this is where the language gets murky, right? This is where it becomes legal speak, and they add all of these provisions in there. And basically what they're doing is, all right, you get this money, but you have to be quiet. You can't talk about it. You can't tell anybody about, you can't tell your story. So it's basically just, another payoff, right? And again, if it's someone that was only abused by Epstein and it wasn't anyone else involved, I can totally see why a lawyer would be like, all right, Epstein's dead. This is our only path to basically justice for you. But any of the other survivors who were abused by multiple people within this organization, and they were trafficked to other people and abused by people like Prince Andrew and George Mitchell, etc., it is a slap in the face to even ask them to sign a document like this, in my opinion. This agreement does not, however, prohibit the women from suing individuals they may have been trafficked to while being abused by Epstein. So I guess that's a nice little addition to it, right? So they can still go after people who were involved in the trafficking, meaning people that they might have been trafficked to, or people that were abusing them while they were involved with Epstein. It definitely looks like there's a a bit of legalese there for people who are in that category as well. So again, it's a decent provision, but I'd have to look at the whole entire thing and read through the whole entire thing before I could say one way or the other I think it's a good idea or not. And again, I'm not like some sort of lawyer or anything, or somebody that, can read through a legal document like that and have this, this great Harvard-style opinion on it or whatever, but I'd like to look at it for myself and see the context of it and try and put, 2 and 2 together, because I'm very skeptical of anything that the estate is involved in. I'm very skeptical of anything that these fund managers are involved in. I've said it from the jump. I'd love an independent group involved in dispersing these funds, not people that are these high-profile fund folks that we have involved in this. The same people that dispersed the 9/11 payouts. And I'm not saying they're bad people by any stretch. I don't know them. I'm not too familiar with all their body of work besides the 9/11 trust and stuff like that. But my point is, why does it always have to be the same insiders, the same people that these people used to rub elbows with? Oh, well, we didn't know them. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. All of these billionaires in New York knew each other. All of these rich people in New York hung out with each other. And anybody saying any differently is lying to you. That means at least one woman, Virginia Roberts, could file a lawsuit against Prince Andrew. Now, I'm not too sure if this claim has to do with Virginia, with Jordan Merson and Lisa Bloom. I know for a fact that Lisa Bloom's not involved with Virginia Roberts' case, at least from the stuff that I've read, but I'm not too sure about Jordan Merson. So I guess we'll have to wait for some clarification and see later on what's what. Roberts claims she was trafficked to Prince Andrew and has provided a photo of her and the royal at the home of Ghislaine Maxwell. But the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family, aka Prince Andrew, has strenuously denied her claim and suggested the image of them is photoshopped, which has been completely debunked by a bunch of people. We had the Kiwi the photographer who I talked about on the podcast a few months ago, who looked at the pictures and absolutely not fake, etc., etc. And many other experts have come forward to say that those pictures weren't photoshopped. So that whole entire excuse from Andrew is out the window, right? Absolutely, positively ridiculous, just like the sweating excuse. The fund also allows the women to remain anonymous should they wish, but they are also not barred from speaking about their compensation or allegations against Epstein. That's interesting. Let's read that again. The fund also allows the women to remain anonymous, should they wish, but they are also not barred from speaking about their compensation or allegations against Epstein. So it looks like they're allowed to talk about what happened with Epstein, but if they accept the settlement, they can't talk about anybody else. Kind of what it's looking like here to me. Again, we have to see the whole entire thing to get some context, or hear from the lawyers perhaps, or, somebody with a little more insider knowledge that's actually, on the ground working on the case. Maybe we'll get some clarification going forward as this story matures a little bit. But what it looks like to me is they're allowed to speak about the situation with Epstein, meaning the abuse they received at Epstein's hands, but they have to compartmentalize it and leave it at just about Epstein. Very interesting. After receiving their compensation, the women will also have 3 days to dismiss with prejudice any legal actions, whether lawsuits, probate claims, or otherwise that releasor has filed against any of the releasees, with each party to bear her, his, or its own costs and attorney fees. So if they accept this compensation, they have to automatically dismiss with prejudice any legal actions. So, again, I'm not too sure what that will all entail. We don't know exactly who we're talking about here, who the 17 girls are. So we don't know their specific cases and the circumstances that surround those cases. So I'm not really too sure what we could say here or take from this, because unless we know who the girls are, we don't know what other cases they might have in court systems right now against Jeffrey Epstein's estate. So we'll have to see where that goes. Merson confirmed the validity of the documents, telling The Sun, "Yes, my clients want to proceed with the voluntary fund so that they have an opportunity to be fully compensated for their significant injuries." And again, 100%, I've said it from the beginning, if this was my daughter or somebody that I cared about, somebody that I knew, and they were only abused by Epstein, I would tell them to take the compensation loot and run. Now, if it was somebody that was close to me and they asked me for my advice, or, they asked me what they think they should do in a situation like this, and they were abused by the organization itself and other people, I would tell them to go all the way to the mattresses. Take this all the way to the mattresses. Because you can't, my personal advice to my client, if I was a lawyer, would be to make sure that everybody involved pays. But again, every circumstance is different, right? Every single circumstance is different, and we don't know all of the little details, all the little nuances of every single case. All we have is an overview, right? So all we can do is talk about and break down the information that we have available to us. Lisa Bloom also confirmed to The Sun that her 5 clients have agreed to participate in the fund. I hate to sound cynical, but that does not shock me with Lisa Bloom. There was no way she's going to take this all the way to the conclusion. She's not about that life. She wants to get in there, get broke off her dough, and move on to the next victim for her to victimize. And that's right, I said it. I believe that Lisa Bloom is a pretty evil person. I hate that she's even involved in this case one bit. I hate the fact that Gloria Allred's involved in this case one bit. They have shown themselves to be nothing more than money grabbers. They have shown themselves to be nothing more than headline snatchers. And in this case, there's plenty of that already, and we don't need the waters any murkier than they are. These settlements are occurring far faster than many anticipated, with some estimating it would take decades before these women saw any money. And that's true. That's definitely true. I thought it would be a long time before this money was dispersed. There's no doubt. But again, the devil is in the details, folks. The devil is always in the details, especially dealing with con and indike. A quarterly accounting report filed by executors for the estate that was obtained by The Sun shows that 33 individuals or companies are seeking damages to be paid out from Epstein's $600 million trust. A majority of the complaints against Epstein have been filed in 3 separate courts in New York. 10 are being tried in federal court in the Southern District of New York, the same venue where Epstein was being tried on criminal charges prior to taking his own life in August, allegedly. 6 of the 10 have been filed by women who chose not to identify themselves in court papers, while the other 4 were filed by women who have gone public with their allegations of sexual abuse. Maria Farmer, who claims she was violently groped by Epstein and Maxwell in 1996, is one of the women. Her sister Annie, who alleges that Epstein made her give him a topless massage when she was underage, also filed a separate complaint. Teresa Helm was 22 when she claims Epstein sexually assaulted her during a job interview. Juliette Bryan alleges she was raped by Epstein multiple times and that he emailed her a request for nude photos just months before his arrest. Reading this stuff just makes me so sick that this guy got away with it for so long, and to the point where he was sending requests for Juliette Bryant to send him nudes just a few months before his second arrest. This dude's just a sick bastard. He was a sick bastard. The people around him were sick. All of his enablers were sick. Anybody defending him is sick. Anybody mocking the survivors is sick. Anybody who has anything ill to say about these girls is a sick person, in my opinion. In addition to those 10 lawsuits, 9 others have been filed in New York, but in state Supreme Court. This includes one complaint that lists 9 Jane Does as plaintiffs and another filed by 2 unnamed females. There are also complaints filed by Jennifer Araz and Tila Davies. Araz sued Epstein days after he went to prison and then refiled to sue his estate after death. She claims the convicted pedophile abused her for over a year at his Upper East Side townhouse while she was attending a nearby school. It's the same thing over and over at this townhouse, right? The same thing with these young girls at this townhouse being abused, showing up, and then all of Epstein's buddies popping in to say hi all the time. We have Trump, we have Clinton, we have Dershowitz, we have Giuliani, we have George Stephanopoulos, we have Katie Couric, we have Doug Band. I can go on. I can go on with all of the scumbags that were hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein while these little girls were running around his house, and nobody said a word. Not a word from any of these people. Oh, they didn't look like they were young. How am I supposed to know how old they are? It's not an excuse anymore. In fact, it's embarrassing that these grown-ass so-called powerful men would use excuses like that. The complaint also names 3 of the women in Epstein's orbit as defendants: Maxwell, Leslie Groff, and Simberly Espinoza. Davies claims she was raped for years by Epstein and then tossed aside when she informed him she had developed an eating disorder. And that, folks, is Jeffrey Epstein in a nutshell, right? Toss you to the side when he's done with you. Discard you like trash when he's done with you. And that was exactly how Jeffrey Epstein operated. But you know what's ironic? You know what's really ironic, folks? The fact that Jeffrey Epstein was discarded the same way after his second arrest by his handlers. He was no longer useful to them. They abandoned him. And in fact, they left him to his fate. There was no rush to save him this time. There was no plea deal coming down the pipe for him. Epstein was abandoned and left, and when all is said and done, he was discarded the same exact way that he loved to discard other human beings. All right, folks, if you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All right, folks, until later on, hope you all have a fantastic Friday afternoon.